Welcome to the second and exciting episode of this Cyber Spot. I have the great pleasure introducing Tina Gravel, who is my co-host, and Gary Berman, who is the person behind a superhero cyber adventures. And we are going to be discussing Gary's adventures in his personal life and how he got into the cybersecurity space, some personal stories. With the intent of this podcast is to really get behind the scenes of, everyday people that are in this space and how they came about, and hopefully get some true insight and takeaways from this conversation. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tina Gravel. I'm Senior VP of Global Channels and Alliances from AppGate. And I wanted to say, if you're on the chat, I'd love to hear what you think about this. My friends and I have been talking recently about, what makes you a person of depth. And one of the things that has come up is that going through pain, some kind of pain, nobody wants to go through it, but if you've gone through it, has that made you a better person? We've all seen these stories about how, bad guys become wronged and then they become super bad guys. But no one seems to talk about how bad things happen to good people and then they become better people. Our guest today has had some terrible things happen to him, and he's actually become even better person. He's one of the best people you'll ever meet. Oh. And we're going to let him tell his story in just a minute. But I'd love to hear from you, either here or on LinkedIn, what you think, because I seem to only be able to connect and be really good friends with soul friends with people that have been through some sort of deep kind of pain. I don't know why that is, but on that note, let me introduce you to Gary Berman. Gary, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into some questions.
Well, thank you so much, Tina Dave, for having me. And it's an incredible kind of coincidence that you said what you just did, because a few years ago, as president of the temple where I live, I was assigned to pick up a rabbi, and so I did. And it turns out he's the author of the book called "Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People?" Wow. And that you just invoked this is kind of exploding my brain right now. and I'll just tell you his answer to that question. He in his seatbelt, by the way, so I knew he couldn't get out of the car. I asked him, I said, "Rabbi, forgive me, but I have to ask you the question. Why do bad things happen to good people?" And he smiled and he said, "It turns out that's not really the question. The question is, we know what bad people do after bad things happen, but what do good people do?" And that's the question. And that's what brings me here today with you. I'm so grateful.
Well, we're grateful to have you. How did you get into cybersecurity?
Well, the best way to say, I'm sure, many of you have seen the movie Forrest Gump, and you'll recall he just, kind of this average guy bumps into all these extraordinary, life-changing situations. And so my, personal journey can be described as I'm the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity. That's a flat out fact. And I have tales that you will not believe. Some of them tragic in the way that you were describing, but now fantastic. I thank God every day for the opportunity to hang out with people like you.
Great.
So, what kind of, you've been through a lot, maybe you can tell us the story of how everything started. Sure. And how even you got interested in the whole space.
Sure. I'll give you the very encapsulated version. Many years ago, my wife, my better half, Valerie, and I started a marketing communications company. We ran it for 10 years. We were very successful. Just grinded it out, so much so that we were able to sell 49% of it to the largest marketing company in the whole world, called the WPP Group out of London. They own all these giant conglomerates, and we're just a little rounding error. Things were going incredibly great after the acquisition. Unfortunately, I suffered a very serious injury that kept me out for about a year of my own company. Unbeknownst to me, right under my nose, while being paid full time, a small group of trusted insiders essentially cloned my company by setting up their own company while working for my wife and I full time for over a year. We didn't know it. And they were doing a bunch of things to drive business away from us and into their coffers, such as spoofing a website, stealing our intellectual property. They even pretended to be whistleblowers and did social engineering and talked to our biggest clients, saying that we were under investigation by the FBI and to cease communications. I found out about that from my clients who told me that they got this call. There were a total of 19 attack vectors, including redirecting phone calls that were coming to my office and to their company that they had set up. And to make an incredibly long story short, we lost everything. We lost our home, everything. And it wasn't just me. I had about 100 employees, and so it was extraordinarily, devastating, and kind of unable to receive justice due to the difficulty of attribution in the judicial system. Even though we knew who it was exactly, we even caught some of the activities hands-on, but we just couldn't prevail. So the company went on for a number of years. We funded all the misdeeds and refunded money, and things like that, just to keep my name. I was pretty well known in a certain type of market segmentation and data analysis and stuff like that. And so we had to close after 5 years. So I moved on to other things, like I worked on veterans related issues. I was the executive director of something called the Anthem Project, which was designed to help warriors return from theater and help them reintegrate back into civil society. We worked on after-school education for underprivileged kids and stuff like that. So to now directly answer your question, David, only about 4 years ago, just to literally put food on the table, because we lost everything and we had to pay back a lot of money. My wife and I said, hey, why don't we see if I can get back into the marketing ecosystem that I left all those years earlier. So I put a few communications out, and I was really honored to be invited to give a keynote speech at a big marketing conference. I did that, and it was unbelievable. People came up to me, where have you been? Are you still doing these reports? Or, hey, can we work with you? It was just nuts. And I had this big stack of business cards, and I came home to my wife with tears of gratitude, said, look, Phoenix rising from the ashes.
Aww.
Until the next day. And I'll pause there because there's another part to it in case you want to ask any questions about that.
Tina, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, how did you find out, what was your first clue that you were being spoofed? What was the first thing that happened where you shook your head and said, well, what's this?
What a great question. It actually came from my wife, who came in one day and she had received a copy of a PowerPoint deck from one of our clients in the telecommunications sector. And it was ours, but it had a different company name on it. And she says, what is it? Isn't this our proprietary presentation? I went, yeah. And they said, who's this? I said, I have no idea. So that was the very first sort of clue. And the big, drop your jaw moment happened to be when I was actually sitting in the bathroom, on a toilet, and I had one of those big Motorola phones. You remember those big gray phones, like the big bricks?
Yeah, the brick.
And I never really used it very much because it was very expensive, at the time, but I had it for VIPs, like presidents of different companies that I work with, and I work with big companies. And it rang. So, I just picked it up, and on the other line was a client and someone that we were getting along great with. They wanted us to take over some of their operations. She was literally screaming at me. She said, "What the F is going on at your company?" And I couldn't speak. She's the one who told me the first one to tell me that she got a call from one of my people pretending to be a whistleblower.
Wow. Wow.
That's what I said. So we all hands on deck. We redid all of the work that we were working on for that particular client, validated 100%, and it was perfect. There was nothing wrong at all. But I returned $185,000 the same day just to keep my reputation without even asking or anyone asking me to do it. And then, like layers of an onion, ultimately there were 19 attack vectors.
Wow.
And we later learned, we later strongly suspected, that it's part of a criminal syndicate.
What's incredible about the story is that people hear about identity theft all the time, right? Specifically,
right.
But they're not so much about company identity theft. That's almost like and it's amazing that something like that happens, and it's because it's one thing to clone an individual, right, and go after, but it's a whole different matter to clone a business. Was there anything you could have done in hindsight to prevent something like that, or make it more difficult for them to go ahead and do that as a company?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, coincidentally, I just had a nice conversation with John Kindervag, who invented zero trust. So if I knew about not trusting anyone, I think that would have helped, at the time. But from a cybersecurity standpoint, oh yeah, I was a sitting duck. They had the keys to the kingdom because they were insiders, and you know a lot about insider threats, and that's what it was.
Well, now we know a lot. Back then, we didn't have the Swiss cheese network that we have now. You had a WAN, which was fully secured, and you had no reason to not trust the folks that you hired. And things were very different back then when you had that Motorola phone. I know that. I understand you're writing a book about your experience. When is that due to be finished?
Well, I think in the fall, but it's a very interesting question because then, I'll tell you how I got into cybersecurity. What I was telling you is just sort of the background so far. But I was ashamed. I didn't want to talk to anyone about any of this because I was just such a victim, and unfortunately I played that role very well. I was in denial for a long time. Like, this is not possible. I spent years being unbelievably angry, at these people. I asked, like, why me? All these kinds of things. I actually learned from a book called On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler.
Yes.
She had come up with this, kind of process for grieving, and it was that for me, anyways. And so I never wanted to talk about it with anyone. And so as part of the process of getting to this moment and just getting my head around, the devastation of what had happened, my wife and I went to here's an interesting story about that. So the psychological impact of this. This is not something I think I've ever said to anyone, so I'll do it here live in the hopes that it will be helpful to people. And that is one day at 7 a.m, I hear, a knock on my door, and I live in a condominium, and it's just not something that ever happens. Mm-hmm. And I looked through the little peephole, and it was a family member who had flown in from the West Coast. And so that means, they took a red eye, and I was saying, like, why are you here? Is everything okay? And they said, oh yeah, just go out, throw on some clothes, I have a meeting. I said, oh, you have business, here where I live or something. And very sort of coy, just said, oh, just go get dressed. We're going to run out. Then I saw that my wife was also dressed, which is earlier than typical. And I said, what's going on? I said, oh, we're going to go to a meeting. They didn't disclose what it was, but I loved them and I knew they loved me and I knew they were concerned about me, and rightly so. I went through serious depression and things like that. And so we were driving and we pull up to this university and get out of the elevator, and I see this big sign that says Department of Psychiatry.
Wow.
And that's when my head almost exploded. I said, are you kidding? And no, we thought it, it would be helpful. And so I said, okay. So went to meet this psychiatrist, great guy, by the way, it turns out. Is going to be in one of my comics, which I'll get to later. And so for 45 minutes or so, I sat there quietly and respectfully just listening to the thoughts that my family had shared about their concerns, of my well-being and mental health. With about 5 minutes left in the first session, the doctor turned to me and says, well, what do you think about this? And I just took a deep breath. I said, it was quite a bit to process, seeing that, the number one pillars of my life seemed to be crumbling around me. But I'm glad that they love me enough to have done this. And I just need to think about this further, it's not something I was really not top of mind. So went through 6 months of kind of couples therapy, and I found it to be very helpful. And one of the things that the doctor recommended is that I start journaling. And so rather than writing, I just dictated into an iPhone. And by the time I converted, voice to text, I had almost 50,000 words.
Wow.
And random thoughts of a cluttered mind. And, I came to understand that, it's kind of a book, but they were not organized, in a way that someone would find that, compelling as a story and stuff like that. And I'm not a writer in that way anyway. So I stopped writing this book 5 years ago. In other words, I stopped journaling because at the last session that we had with the psychiatrist, he called us in and he said, we don't need to see you anymore. And my wife was very concerned. And she said, do you have a diagnosis? He says, yeah, I wish all my patients were like Gary. And she said, well, do you have a prescription for him? And he wrote down on his pad a prescription. Take a guess what they prescribed for me.
Keep laughing. I don't know.
Sort of. Benadryl.
No way.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Benadryl.
So I said, if you're ever feeling edgy, take some Benadryl. I didn't even know what that was, and I realize it's for allergies. It makes you sleepy. So, I'm a type A personality. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I kind of like it. I mean, it's not for everyone, but, I seem to get along pretty well with people, and I mean, I thought maybe if I could take Benadryl and pour it on my keyboard or something, somehow that would melt into,
oh my God,
like some hard drive. Yeah, okay, I'll try it. And
Gary, I give Benadryl to my dogs. Okay.
Well, is that making you feel better or worse?
I don't know. I just
okay.
It just had to be said. Okay.
I'll go with the laughter. Fair enough.
All right.
Do you have a happy dog? I mean, I guess that's my question.
No. It's when they need to settle. Okay. When they need they need to chill, as they say.
Well, you're barking up the wrong tree with me.
Bingo.
That's good.
If we were on Gary's show, that would be a bam. He would have this big thing that came up like bam. His show has a lot more special effects. We have a lot to do, Dave.
Well, I do comics. I do superhero comics.
I know.
It's just a totally different everything, and
Anyway.
So that's what happened to that point. And when you're ready, I'll tell you how I got into cybersecurity.
Well, you were about to talk about what happened with the business cards, and you were rising from the Phoenix, and then all of a sudden something happened. So
it was the day. So I come home incredibly grateful. I have all these business cards, have a chance to do it again. And the very next day, after 10 years of zero communication with any of the alleged perpetrators, which, by the way, we had a cease and desist order. We thought that would be sufficient, but it wasn't. So the next day, after 10 years of no communications, two of them on the same day checked my LinkedIn profile. You can see like who viewed your profile.
Right.
So I either thought it was an extraordinary coincidence, or they were either at the conference or heard that I was speaking at it or something. And the next day, boom, 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 the attack started again.
Wow.
I could not believe it.
Wow.
And it's, way better than me, it's incredibly easy to go down these rabbit holes, and
Yes.
and have false attributions and false positives and all that stuff. So I didn't. I let it go. I would see these, to me, even at the time when I knew nothing about any of this stuff, I could see that things were weird, like a cursor moving by itself on my screen, opening files, and just things like that, and many other things. Yeah, that's what I said. And so I said, I knew no one's going to believe me. Forget it. They'll say that I'm PTSD or schizophrenic or nuts or whatever. So I just decided to start taking pictures. So I took screenshots of whatever. I see things or make little videos pertaining to my router when the technician from the cable company had to come not once, not twice, not three, but 4 different times to change routers. And I have him on tape saying that within 10 minutes, my system was hacked. I thought it'd be advantageous to have other people sort of, see this stuff and document it.
May I ask what year that was?
It was about 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. And that's when I decided to pivot to become an advocate, because being a victim, unfortunately, is not unique. There's so many victims of life, as you were saying earlier, and it's exhausting. And I said, okay, I'm going to just make this giant pivot. And, I think Justice Brandeis once said, I'll paraphrase, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I said, okay, I'm going to shine the light on what happened here. So through a series of Forrest Gump things, I was invited to give a speech at the Gartner Security and Risk Management Conference. And I just, loaded all, some of tip of the iceberg, actually, of my photographs, things like that, into like a PowerPoint. And I've been a presenter my whole life, so I never really got very nervous. But for this one, I was shaking in my boots. Do you know why?
Why?
Because I was going to present my evidence to the cybersecurity community. They can call BS, right? They say, oh, that's because of this, that's a known this, that's a like that. And I would just get blown out of the water because I'd never shown anyone. And guess what happened?
They said you were right.
I got a standing ovation.
Wow.
And about 30 of them were waiting in line, and they're asking me, well, how did this Bluetooth thing happen? I'm going like, how am I supposed to know?
Yeah, you're supposed to know, right?
It turns out I was sort of an early sort of, I'll use the victim word, of hacks that are now kind of widely known, like Bluetooth vulnerabilities and spoof VPNs, and backdoor router, hacks and Thunderbolt vulnerabilities within Mac peripherals and all this nutty stuff that we knew it had to be. This was not like some little thing. This was an orchestrated sort of ongoing series of things. And one would ask, like, why me? I know some of those things, of which I can disclose a little bit here. Now,
what about law enforcement? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about
many times. Yeah. They were great. Law enforcement's great. I love law enforcement. I'm a big fan. I do a lot of stuff with DHS and Department of Defense and CISA and all that. However, when it's a small crime like mine, and it's very hard to prove economic damages, it's very difficult to get the level of attention compared to other things that are going on. And having said that, I had 2 FBI agents here in my home. And while they were literally standing over my shoulder when I was showing them some things on my laptop, they saw the cursor. They said, look, did you see that? Did you see that? He goes, yeah, we saw it.
Wow.
And other things. At that time, I didn't really have many pictures to show them. It was, I wouldn't even call it forensics, but it was kind of forensics, like unauthorized handshakes. Turns out there was a pineapple placed in an apartment 2 floors below me. There were 36 people connected to my OnStar account, according to General Motors.
Wow.
You know, so this is not some like phishing thing. This is a big deal, and I was a pretty valuable target for a number of reasons. At the time, I'd done some things for the White House and other things like that. So there's more, you know, to motivations and all that. But anyways, I'll stop there for a minute.
You know, I've heard some of this before, and it still blows me away when I hear it. It's just so incredible. You know, I did a little bit of a post this morning. You know, we're kind of keeping a little bit of a low profile as we get more and more involved with this show.
Right.
But I had to tell people, you know, you won't believe this story. You just won't. It's incredible and fascinating and scary all at the same time. And it is. I mean, just the thought of all of those people listening in on OnStar to your conversations every time you're in the car. I mean, to me, what was the movie where they were looking at you on the camera? Snowden. It sounds like Snowden. I mean,
or actually the Truman
right?
Show.
Right.
It's not exactly that, but it's kind of like the Truman Show.
But you know, as it turns out, you're an average guy, Gary.
Yeah,
you had a successful business, but all in all, an average guy, right? Yes, you were doing some work here and work there. They saw some ways of maybe exploiting you to get some high value targets, but come on, Snowden was Snowden. Let's put things in perspective. Good grief, that's scary. Anyway, David, go ahead. I know you wanted to say something.
No, you're you know, right on the money. And what's interesting is that when something like that happened, I think most people are, you know, they don't know where to go. I mean, you were somehow very resourceful. You went out to, like, you know, you do law enforcement and went out to, you know, seek help from cybersecurity professionals and so on. But I think the majority of the population is very clueless. Like, you know, something that happens to them, and even the police force, you know, if you go to like your local police force enforcement, and they also don't know what to do because it's very complex. You know?
I know a lot about that.
Yes.
You know, I worked on exactly what you're saying, David, for a long time, trying to get the right kind of help and stuff. You know, and so to now continue a little bit on that journey, I said, okay, in order to be an advocate, I have to learn about this stuff. You know, at the time I was 59 years of age. It's not like I was going to go get, you know, certifications and stuff. So I got a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies.
Joe Steinberg. Yeah.
It was an earlier version from him.
Oh, okay.
He was the one from Palo Alto Networks.
Okay.
Tina, we should have him on the show.
Let's try to get him. Yeah.
And so I said, okay, great. You know, the yellow book with the black stripe. I said, okay, perfect. Cybersecurity, I'm your guy. So I go and I read page 1. By 10 pages in, I was lost. And I said, okay, it's just not going to work. I just can't grasp this. And so rather than quitting, I found the CISO of Palo Alto Networks, a great guy named Rick Howard. I called him up. It took me a while to get him, but I did. And I said, Mr. Howard, you know, I just started reading your book and I got lost. And he kind of laughed. And so I'm a funny guy. Like, I'm laughing, having lost my whole life. And I said, may I ask why you're laughing? He goes, well, it's not really for beginners. And that's when my head exploded. Why do you call it Cybersecurity for Dummies? And that's when I realized there had to be a better way to distill complicated technology information into something that people can get their heads around, at least a little bit. And as it happens, you know, another kind of Forrest Gump moment, I saw Spider-Man, and then this light bulb went up. Superhero comics.
Yay.
You know, yeah. So, but not only did I not know anything about the subject, I didn't know anything about comics. You know, so I knew I needed to listen and learn. So I went to LinkedIn and I did a search by CSO, And one at a time, I invited them to ask me real-life blinded stories of cybercrime, answering the questions, like, what happened? What were the consequences? What were the lessons learned for possible inclusion into comics or animations or stuff like that? And last time I checked, I have 22,864 LinkedIn connections with the most important people in the world in cybersecurity and technology. Yeah, well, they're all like you. They're helpers. You are the unsung cyber heroes, and I found a home for real. It started when I gave the speech and the way everyone reacted. I said, wow, I thought they were going to kill me. Clobber my stuff, point out all these problems, and just the opposite. They embraced me and I fell in love with you, the collective you. And I start every day at 4 a.m. trying to shine the light to say thank you.
Well, I'm just wondering how we get tenacious Tina into the.
Well, we already know that's a character. And
that's awesome.
She's going to be something one of these days. Days.
It's funny. It's funny you said that because we signed a joint venture with an Israeli cybersecurity firm to bring our characters to 3D in the form of virtual training. And we have a character called Phoebe the Fisher. And I'll just change the name to Tina the Tenacious. But you're evil. Is that a problem?
Well, you know what? I've been told that by ex-boyfriends.
That's so funny.
Sounds to me like that's for another podcast.
Yes, not this one. Not this one. No.
That's funny.
Anyway, well, Gary, this is it's such a fascinating story. One of the things that I'd like to understand is, how you go about doing business today. What is it that you offer with your current company? Because, comics and cybersecurity, I'm a little, confused, right?
You should be. It's never been done really into any way. And I really appreciate that insight. I was unclear as well, would such a serious topic, that's based on, well, there's a word, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. With people in that world, and there's a lot of reason to be afraid and uncertain and doubtful. So, I get that. But I started thinking about it like it's this giant aircraft carrier, but kind of slow to turn. But all these planes, all this crazy stuff, happening all over, sort of like cybersecurity. Would I be able to be at least a tip of the spear, maybe, to pivot this whole community from fear to fun? Because, one of the things I've learned a lot about from listening and learning to so many people, and by the way, as part of my journey, I didn't just stop with, LinkedIn or my Cybersecurity for Dummies book. I went to 53 cybersecurity conferences in 3 years.
Wow.
I became a reporter for a cyber magazine, and that sort of flipped the whole food chain. So people now wanted me to write about their stuff. And then COVID hit and we started the show and it became a thing. This notion of comics, I didn't know anything about comics. So you ever been to a Comic-Con?
Yes, I have.
It's amazing, right?
I went with my dad. Yeah, he used to be a big fan of this. I wish he were still alive to see this show because he would get a big kick out of you.
So, I heard just the tail end, or I saw on TV, the logistics of where this convention was here where I live. And it said, tomorrow from 11 till 6 or whatever. So I'm going to go to this convention. I put on a white shirt. I have a blazer, khaki pants. I have my backpack, ready to go to a convention. And I go in the parking lot. 15 seconds after I get out of my car, there's a lady with these giant green butterfly wings and this green face with antenna. And she says, "Sir, I think you're overdressed." And, that was my entry into that insane world. That's insane, but beautiful world of the creativity of, cosplay and superheroes and comics and storytelling. And I just jumped in with both feet and I went nuts. I started watching Stan Lee, reading his books called The Marvel Way. I started working with some illustrators in India because I couldn't afford anything. And the only time they could work with me was for 1 hour a day from 4 to 5 p.m. in the afternoon, which is 4 o'clock in the morning, which is why today I got up at 4 and I'm not even a morning person.
Wow. So how do you come up with those ideas, for the stories? Like, where do you gather those, and what kind of feedback do you get when people start reading it? Because I'm assuming that people can totally relate to the comics, but then the cybersecurity, these are typically heavy, more kind of sophisticated topics. So it's a kind of the merger between fun, cool, like, to more like, serious type of topics. That's really interesting.
That's such a great question. So Tina kind of hit on the idea, but I just kind of operate on this premise that everyone knows what FUD is. So we talk enough about substance, whether it be in our comic or on the show. However, each person's definition of fun is different. So I recorded 2 shows today. The first one was with a chief data scientist for a company called Mindcast about artificial intelligence. And this guy's, flat out genius. I was featuring his book, and I didn't know anything about this stuff. And so I noticed in the background, he had some dogs. And so I just said, hey, what are your dogs' names? And his whole demeanor just changed. I mean, he's just like a regular guy with two dogs, and that was fun. And then, we dove into some of the complexities of artificial intelligence. I had a little bit of, sort of insight into it because I had recently done a show based on a report presented to Congress from the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. And by the way, one of the ways that, we're monetizing this stuff. We sell sponsorships to the comics, to the show, and we're hosting our first series of micro think tanks once a month.
Awesome.
Aligned with the report that I was telling you about. It was a 56-page report that covers lots of stuff. And it's aligned with CISA's critical infrastructure sectors and the ISACs. So I'm partnering with an ISAC each month. So we're doing our first ones in early May and stuff like that. So I don't think I'm going to get rich from this. I think I'm going to get my name back.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we have, I think we're getting down to the bottom of the hour here, and it'd be nice to have you back to hear more and to hear how the book is going at some point.
Yeah, really the fall. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I neglected to answer. So, I'm ready to continue writing. Like this moment, just feeling comfortable enough. I'm so grateful for this opportunity and for who you are and what you do and why you do it. And I think it'll help other people. We have a book cover. It's called Stalking on Air. And it's a very interesting cover of the book, showing this character like in this Wi-Fi and his life shattered with glass, and I just want to make sure that I leave you with a complete picture. I wake up, every morning, and I just thank God, for the opportunity that I've been given. And maybe this is a way to close the loop. I don't know. We know what bad people do. Well, I'm trying to do something good with it, and I hope it helps.
There's a wonderful chat. Somebody is mentioning in the chat, so sorry to hear about your story, Gary. Great to see you bouncing back. Amazing. Amazing. And I would have to second that. We're just grateful to have you. Should we mention that we have our next show on the 29th, David?
Yeah, absolutely. On the 29th. And,
on the 29th with Joe Peterson. And we should, I also want to mention, we need to stop Asian hate. This is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous what's going on. Come on, get a grip, everybody. Ridiculous.
I think we should stop hating, period.
All hate. But
well, it's interesting you say that, because half of our characters are multicultural.
Good.
And are women. And it's for exactly what you're saying, but in an animated way.
Good.
Yeah, well, come on, people. It's like, 2021, we should know better. I think we're, but I think the younger generation, I got 2 kids, and, they couldn't tell, they don't even care who, what color you are, gender or whatnot. I think the younger generation is going to grow up in a different type of environment. And I think the future is bright for everybody. So.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. So Gary, this has been a real pleasure. Your story is truly fascinating, and it really is amazing. Like, the viewer mentioned that, bouncing back like that, and not even that, like reinventing yourself, not knowing, anything about the space, and becoming like a pillar of guidance and awareness around this topic is truly fascinating. And we'll love to have you back at sometime soon and hear more stories, and we'll follow your work as well. So, and then last thing I mentioned, where can people find you and get engaged and follow your work and so on? What's the best place to find you?
I appreciate that. Easiest is on LinkedIn. Just, Gary Berman. We're upgrading our website, which should be done next week, which I think would be super cool. But LinkedIn is the easiest way.
Okay. Fantastic. Right. Thanks all for joining, and looking forward to seeing you all next week.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks, Gary.
Always a pleasure.